What's a horrifying experience you have lived through? It's more creepy than horrifying. This was right after the mass Las Vegas shooting. I was at my sister's keeping her company, her husband was out of town, and we had her 2 young children. We were talking about the shooting and how probably a lot of people don't run away at the start of a mass shooting. B/C gunfire in real life doesn't sound like it does on TV. At that very moment, we heard this bang 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 and I thought it was someone trying to kick in her door. We took the kids to the bedroom and hit the panic button on her security system. It wasn't someone trying to kick in the door. Someone had shot through her front door. I was kidnapped by an ex. Well, I say kidnapped. It all started with severe blackmail. Death threats. Having people watch my house. Telling me when my family were home, etc. Then he kidnapped me and kept me locked in a hotel room for 3 days. I was beaten. Raped. Abused. Tortured. He was threatening to sell me to a Bulgarian biker gang where I was to be turned basically into their heroin junkie. He had arranged for me to be collected from the hotel the next morning. Luckily my family had reported me missing and in the early hours the police managed to find me. I saw my once chance of escape and took it. Thankfully now he is serving 23 years. I definitely learned a lot about myself in those 3 days. The campus house that I lived in had a pretty fucked up history. Suicides took place there. Previous owners died and it was old as hell. I stayed there all summer alone because of my job in my college's city and legit every night I'd hear shit. Before I'd chalk it up to one of my 4 other roommates making noise, but now I was alone. I pretty much heard weird shit almost every night. The first day I got there, I went upstairs to my room and the second I reached the top of the stairs I heard a door slam downstairs. Throughout the summer I heard footsteps, doors, and a bunch of other shit. I was almost sure, still think this today, that there was a squatter who somehow avoided me all summer. There were days when the front door would be unlocked in the morning where I vividly remember locking it at night. I'd say to myself, okay, here I am locking the door, and give it a few tugs to make sure it was locked and it'd be opened come morning. Maintenance usually let themselves in periodically, but I'd call them up and they'd say they hadn't been there. The creepiest one was the door that led up to the attic. It was a regular door, not one of those pull-down ones. Some days it'd be slightly opened and I'd pull on it closed, but it wouldn't open by itself. I'd close it, put a chair in front of it, but it'd still be slightly opened. My roommate came down one weekend that I happened to be gone and he said he heard a lot of banging as well throughout the night. One day I straight up yelled, if there's anyone squatting here I literally do not care and you can stay, but let me know you're here and we can set up some simple ground rules. I'm chill. I thought I heard some rustling from the basement but nothing ever happened. Funny part is, if there was a squatter, I wouldn't have cared too much. It's the college's house, so if someone wanted to be my roommate for the summer I would have been totally okay with it as long as they weren't a psycho. It's not supernatural or weird. But I was with my dad when he died. He had cancer, sarcoma. And towards the end his body just started failing. He was in a medically induced coma for the last week of his life. And my mother made the difficult decision to pull the plug when it was determined the cancer had taken over and he wouldn't pull through. In the small hospital room when it was time there was myself, my mother, my older sister, 4 of my dad's closest relatives, a doctor and nurse, and a woman who was there to read his last rites. It was shockingly quiet apart from us softly crying and the woman reading the religious stuff. I'm not religious so I'm not sure what the proper terminology is here. My dad's face turned a purplish blue shade and his body lightly convulsed, and then it was just over in a couple minutes. At the time I was 17. Probably in shock. And very sad. But I didn't think I would linger over the memory as much as I do even now as a 24-year-old. When I was 19 I was 7 months pregnant with my oldest daughter. I still lived with my parents and came home after work around 11:30 p.m. I usually checked that the vehicles were locked before going inside. But this night I was overcome with a sense of immense fear. I wouldn't even look towards my parents' vehicles and hurried into the house. 20 minutes later a guy is knocking on our door telling us that my parents' SUV was on fire and to get out of the house. Saving our lives, and we called 911. There was a serial arsonist on the loose in our town, and when he was caught and he confessed, he admitted to watching me come home that night and how he was preparing to hurt me in case I had caught him, but I never looked over his direction as he was sitting in my parents' SUV when I had arrived home. It took years before I was able to be out at night alone. I got in a fight with my mom. She pushed me to a bed and started beating the hell out of me. She used nails, hands, elbows, everything. I had to throw a punch to her face and kick her to run away from that room. I literally pissed myself because of the fear. I thought I was going to die. Still have nightmares about it. After getting evicted from our apartment, my sister and I lived in a station wagon with our mom for almost a month. One night, we were parked in a lot kind of hidden behind some dumpsters. It was just my sister and me, trying to sleep when we woke up to someone tapping on the window. It was an old man with a scraggly beard and these wet lesions all over his face. He smiled at us and told us in this raspy voice, "Hey, roll down the window." In the dim light from the street lamp, he looked like a demon pressing his face against the window glass. We shook our heads and held each other as he went around the station wagon checking each door to see if it would open. Eventually, he came back to the rear and this time he wasn't smiling but looking really angry and demented. He started slamming on the back window and telling us to open the fucking window, you fucking cunts. I remember being terrified that he was going to break the glass with his fists. He suddenly stopped and walked away when an SUV pulled in and shone its headlights on him. I don't know if it was a cop or a security guard or just someone driving by, but it was enough to scare him away. My sister and I jumped out of the car as the SUV pulled away. We went to the laundromat and sat in there for the rest of the night. One night of college, I heard a woman screaming for help. I looked out my window and saw her right next to the street. Keep in mind this is a popular college town and the street was busy and there didn't seem to be anything immediately attacking or endangering her. After a few minutes I was about to go down when a car pulled up and 3 guys got out. I could overhear the convo since it was right out of my bedroom, but she said no one was paying attention and they should try some other apartment. They all jumped in and drove off. A month later an apartment got broken into and 4 people were caught. 1 woman and 3 men. Apparently she was in the house and left the door unlocked and the men then came in and robbed the place. I had a stepdad and he was heavily on drugs. We are talking meth and heroin. My mom finally decided to leave him after 6 years when he threatened our lives. We had to go into hiding and get a restraining order. We later moved in with my nana. Not so far from the area where we originally lived. There was nothing more scary than seeing a car that looked similar to his or going to the store and seeing someone who looked like him. You would basically freeze in fear. I hated living with him. Because he was abusive as well. Getting abused by a 30-year-old when I was 15/16 was probably the worst. He screwed with my head so bad I almost believed it was normal. He'd always say you can't rape the willing, as he poured alcohol down my throat. I was in Vegas when I was maybe 22 waiting for someone outside the bathrooms in an empty part of a casino. Some guy pushed me against the wall and kept telling me how beautiful I was while trying to drag me towards the exit. He had pulled me about 20 feet. And I was trying hard to get away. I don't know why I didn't scream. We were only about 4 feet from the door when the guy I was with came out of the bathroom and scared the would-be abductor away. Another 30 seconds and I would have been gone. There are more, but that's probably enough. When I was maybe 19 or 20 I nearly got run off the road on my way home from work one night. No actual accident. But it shook me up so I pulled off on the shoulder to calm down before continuing to drive. A windowless van pulled up behind me and a man got out and approached my car. He asked if I was okay. And I told him I was fine. Just gathering myself after a scare. He offered for me to wait in the van with his wife and kids. He insisted multiple times that I get in his van. Luckily my door was already locked and I had only cracked the window to speak with him. Since he parked his van right behind me and I could see in my rear view there were no visible passengers in his van. I've seen a lot since I used to live in a bad part of town. But the one that really stood out was when the wireman was literally burned into a crisp. We were at the church next door, which was at the 2nd floor and had a big window. From the back you could see the wireman doing something. But then suddenly he grabbed hold on a live wire. He tensed up, started shaking, and he couldn't let go. People tried getting him down using wooden sticks, but it only caused him to fall down, still clinging on the live wire. I didn't see anything else after him falling down, but our neighbors said he was literally charred and unrecognizable. In 2016 I laid my motorcycle down going about 45 miles per hour. When I knew I was going to wreck, I had just enough time to realize that this was not going to be good. Everything went black and I came to standing in the middle of the road watching the crash. I watched my body flop across the pavement and didn't really care. Everything was more real than I've ever known. The colors were brighter and just more. The birds chirped in the most beautiful way you could imagine. Everything was super focused except the body and bike. They looked different somehow. I don't know how to describe it. I noticed a male presence, that I never saw, silently pushed me and I was back in my body. I sat up in the ditch, wiped the blood from my eyes and slowly got up and started walking for help. I was by myself, couldn't lift my bike and hadn't told anyone where I was going. I made a lot of mistakes that day. Going alone without having my license. Taking back roads I wasn't familiar with. Not wearing gear. Not wearing a helmet. Etc. I was dumb, but that experience changed my life. Thanks for watching.